2013 was a very interesting year for economic data as it relates to the working class relationship with the capitalist class. Now, far from where we're being told about the recovery, I think the data from this time period shows us what kind of situation we're walking into for 2014. And I think it shows that the contradictions between the capitalist class and the working class are now more acute, possibly than they've ever been before since the beginning of the actual recession. One of the great things about capitalism we're told about is the incentive, the profit motive, and that the harder you work, the more money you're going to make. And this is the drive that makes people work. And without this, nobody would be working. Well, as the data actually shows, this is not actually the case. Since the 1970s, as the rate of worker productivity increased, the wages of the worker did not rise correspondingly, meaning the capitalists extracted more value from the laboring worker and did not give it to him. This shows, as Marx correctly predicted, that the rate of exploitation increased. Between 1979 and 2012, productivity rose 63.8%, but compensation per hour for production and non-supervisory workers, who constitute 80% of the private sector workforce, rose only 7.5%. In keeping with this theme of increasing the rate of exploitation of the worker, other data also shows that CEOs gave to themselves a greater share of the value also created by workers. After the global crisis of capitalism, the ratio of pay between workers and CEOs shrank due to the sheer inability to pay CEOs as much. Interestingly, bank CEOs did not have a hard time getting larger bonuses. Once the initial shock of the crisis had been absorbed and profitability returned, the CEOs once again increased their share of the value generated by the workers' labor. Another one of the claims made by people who support capitalism is that capitalists don't hold all the power because we have bourgeois parliamentarism and we get to vote with our dollars. Lol, that's not democracy. Yet the following data shows this to be quite the opposite in truth. If there's one thing that capitalism can be counted on to do, it's work out for the capitalist class at the expense of the working class. The quote-unquote recovery from the global capitalist crisis has leaned heavily in the bourgeois' favor. The capitalist system favors those who own capital. By the third quarter of 2013, the share of corporate sector incomes accruing to profits and other forms of capital income had reached 25.8%, the highest share ever recorded. This is largely to do with the economics of imperialism. More manufacturing was moved overseas, leading to a transfer of value creation into more exploitative labor markets. Domestically, the recovery has been largely centered on financial manipulation, central bank funds, few low-risk loans, and risky financial gambling. You know, some of the stuff that caused the crisis to begin with. While this has been pretty much all good news for the capitalist class, it has not been good news for those of us in the working class. Those of us, the primary measure of recovery is centered around the issue of employment. The single most important thing for workers in economic recovery is the return of employment. Despite the claims to the contrary, this has not happened. The data is really skewed when the talking heads of the bourgeois tell us about how things are back to normal. Jobs have been created to near pre-recession levels, but not enough. Why? Well, in November, we had 1.3 million fewer jobs than we did when the recession began in December 2007. The problem is that the population grew during those 6 years. We would need 6.6 million more jobs for the people who became a part of the labor pool. This means the overall health of the labor market still needs 7.9 million new jobs for employment to reach pre-recession levels. So as we can see, the recovery has been very, very beneficial to the capitalist class, and not so much to those of us in the working class, or poorhouse now, depending on how it turned out for each individual person. So the next time one of the talking heads or somebody you know goes on about how the recovery is here and that we're all back to normal now, ask them, whose recovery was it? Thank you for watching. Go ahead, rate, comment, subscribe, share on various social media. If you want, there's some other great content here you could check out.